entrance into the harbor, and as the old custom-house annoyances had long since been abolished, most of the passengers were prepared for a speedy landing. One of these passengers, a man about 35, stood looking out over the stern of the vessel instead of gazing, as were most of his companions, towards the city which they were approaching. He looked out over the harbor, under the great bridge gently spanning the distance between the western end of Long Island and the New Jersey shore, its central pier resting where once lay the old battery, and so he gazed over the river and over the houses stretching far to the west, as if his eyes could catch some signs of the country far beyond. This was Roland Clew, the hero of our story, who had been studying and experimenting for the past year in the scientific schools and workshops of Germany. It was towards his own laboratory and his own workshops, which lay out in the country far beyond the wide line of buildings and settlements which lined the western bank of the Hudson, that his heart went out and his eyes vainly strove to follow. Skillfully steered, the Thalia moved slowly between high stone piers of massive construction, but the Euterpe, or upper part of the vessel, did not pass between the piers, but over them both, and when the pier heads projected beyond her stern, the motion of the lower vessel ceased. Then the great piston, which supported the socket in which the ball of the Euterpe moved, slowly began to descend into the central portion of the Thalia, and as the tide was low, it was not long before each side of the upper hull rested firmly and securely upon the stone piers. Then the socket on the lower vessel descended rapidly until it was entirely clear of the ball, and the Thalia backed out from between the piers to take its place in a dock where it would be fitted for the voyage of the next day but one, when it would move under the Melpomene, resting on its piers a short distance below, and adjusting its socket to her ball would lift her free from the piers and carry her across the ocean. The pier of the Euterpe was not far from the great Long Island and New Jersey bridge, and Roland Clew, when he reached the broad sidewalk which ran along the river front, walked rapidly towards the bridge. When he came to it, he stepped into one of the elevators, which were placed at intervals along its sides from the waterfront to the far distant point where it touched the land, and in company with a dozen other pedestrians, speedily rose to the top of the bridge, on which moved two great platforms, or floors, one always keeping on its way to the east and the other to the west. The floor of the elevator detached itself from the rest of the structure and kept company with the movable platform until all of its passengers had stepped onto the latter, when it returned with such persons as wished to descend at that point. As Clew took his way along the platform, walking westward with it, as if he would thus hasten his arrival at the other end of the bridge, he noticed that great improvements had been made during his year of absence. The structures on the platforms, to which people might retire in bad weather or when they wished refreshments, were more numerous and apparently better appointed than when he had seen them last, and the long rows of benches on which passengers might sit in the open air during their transit had also increased in number. Many people walked across the bridge, taking their exercise, while some who were out for the air and the sake of the view walked in the direction opposite to that in which the platform was moving, thus lengthening the pleasant trip. At the great elevator over the old battery, many passengers went down and many came up, but the wide platforms still moved to the east and moved to the west, never stopping or changing their rate of speed. Roland Clew remained on the bridge until he had reached its western end, far out on the old Jersey flats, and there he took a car of the suspended electric line which would carry him to his home, some 50 miles in the interior. The rails of this line ran along the top of parallel timbers, some 20 feet from the ground, and below and between these rails the cars were suspended, the wheels which rested on the rails being attached near the top of the car. Thus it was impossible for the cars to run off the track, and as their bottoms or floors were 10 or 12 feet from the ground, they could meet with no dangerous obstacles. In consequence of the safety of this structure, the trains were run at a very high speed. Roland Clew was a man who had given his life